All right, guys, welcome back to Larry Buys Houses, your number one resource on wholesaling here in Canada and the human nature business that it is. So, we're in a series right now, the Money People Deal series. I'm going through the book that Stefan Arniel made me read before I started um, working in his business. He said, read this book, maybe buy the book. And he said, read this book, come back, and when you're done reading it, and I'll get you started in an acquisition. So I read it overnight. I came back and I read this. Got a private seller here on the phone texting me. We'll deal with it after. So one of the chapters I really like here, let it focus in here, chapter 19, and we're talking about crossing the minefield to wealth. So when you look at, we're building these businesses, we're building maybe a solo wholesaling business. And this is good because it's not a new thing. And so instead of having to recreate something that's not necessarily needing to be recreated, we can usually take a system, learn a system, and then export that system in a particular way. And so at the beginning of the chapter here, it talks about where it is here. One question is relevant. If there was $1 million of cash for you on the other side of a minefield, you have four options. One, stay put. Two, make a run for it and hope for the best. C, go slowly and steadily. Or D, follow someone who knows the quickest and safest route. And so when you're looking at starting businesses, it talks about the like staying put. You're trying to get wealthy. I think with some particular higher income jobs, and like if you have a higher income job and you're able to actually put money into savings or investments, I think there is a possibility for you to get wealthy while working. But people are typically, and there's a section here that really hits hard, and I wanted to bring it in because it's a little bit later, but it says, um, time is the most important currency in life and in wealth. Wealth is actually not measured in dollars, but in time. If you get wealthy at the end of your life, well, you've accumulated everything into this curve. So the time in which it takes to do that with a job is why people typically don't do it. Or if they do it, they'd spent, worked at one place for like 30 years or something like that. So it starts with staying put and talks about in staying put, this is where people like just generally get stuck. For most people, any sort, so for most people, any sort of risk is too much. And because of that, they prefer the total safety rather than freedom. So even with $1 million on the other side of a minefield, the average person would prefer to stay put instead of take any sort of risk towards their death. And I guess, $1 million, maybe it's an old adage, but put an infinite amount of money on the other side. There's a certain amount of people that still, to not have to risk the injury of it will not participate. And then there's the people who, in the book here it calls the make a run for it and hope for the best. And I like what Stefan's saying in here. He's like, I've done that. I've survived. I've taken my hits in real estate. And, even with a real estate education that I got, I still feel like you still, it's still a minefield. Like if you're spending all day, which is business, if you're spending all day in minefields, the the best strategy is, especially if like it's a business, you're running it all year, the best strategy is always going to be to follow someone who's done it. Um, because if you were navigating just one or two or three minefields in your entire life, you have something difficult, something that's ever changing and it's random, you would probably do what most people do when they look in, they get excited about business. They say, I'm going to make a run for it, hope for the best. I'm going to start this t-shirt company. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to hope for the best. That can work, but more often it's the lack of planning or organization and the little steps that it actually takes to execute something like any sort of like larger thing. And yes, you can get it done, but it might just be chaos all the way through. And there's a better way than that. So then people would say, okay, well, I'm just going to go slow and steady and go through the minefield. And really, if you have no other option, if there's no one that you could possibly think of that could help you with this business problem or the situation that you're in, a soldier left to his own devices to cross a minefield will do a slow and steady, but there used to be, and I'm sure you can find it if you search it, they used to do patterns of movement that had the highest probability. They would train the soldiers to move in a pattern through a minefield that had the highest probability that you would not encounter um, mines all the way through. And so even when it was, well, then again, look at that. They're training the soldiers that are going to be dealing with minefields every day, the most basic framework of how to navigate a minefield without any one to navigate it through for you. But even that still requires you to go slow and steady to a certain degree because you don't have that person who's actually walked it. Like the guy in the training facility boot camp back in the United States wasn't navigating the terrain he was about to teach you how to navigate. Maybe he had been there a bit, but there's no way he could prepare you for every minefield that you might encounter, right? And so when we look at the safest route, it always comes down to being option number 4. Follow someone who knows the safest route. And this, if you imagine, if you imagine there's like a minefield to traverse, and it wasn't the soldiers that figured it out. It was a farmer. And he says to the guy, he says, look, they mined my whole field. But if you guys want to cross through it, I can show you that, but it's going to cost you. What do you have for food and provisions? Otherwise, good luck out there. So he charges for the knowledge and the exchange of like where the path actually is. So the make a run for it is a great strategy to get started. Going slow and steady when things actually get difficult is important and you have to. But the fourth one is you don't know what slow and steady is unless you have some training in here. The only person, well, the first two people, option one, which is the stay put people, they don't have any entrepreneurial training. So they're scared and they've never done anything even semi entrepreneurial. So they're scared. They're not doing anything. The second people have maybe believed they could and jump into it. It talks about people make a run for it in real life. It will take on so much risk that they end up getting hurt or financially wiped out. Some of these people may start risky businesses that they do not understand or will put all their eggs in one basket. Although the strategy could pay off and pay off big, I don't personally recommend it. I have made a few runs in my life and have risked everything on some deals. In hindsight, making a run for it was far too much risk, and there are so many better ways to cross the minefield to wealth. And this is again, he's saying this the same thing that goes over and over again here is that everyone, even the person who makes a run for it, should probably get some training. If you're gonna just make a run for it and you don't want any coaching, you should be reading, like books exist. Like training is really an accountability to say, hey, did you read your book this week? Because maybe you need that person or you want that person to like help you make sense of what you're reading. And so let's see what the action step here is on the chapter. We are all faced with a minefield that stands between where we are today and where we want to be. The two questions we must ask ourselves are, who will help us cross the minefield to wealth? Two, what will you pay to get to your destination? Yeah, like you could walk somewhere, you could buy a horse to get somewhere, you could drive a car somewhere, you can take a plane somewhere. How much are you willing to pay to get there with the time remaining? Because okay, you become wealthy and you're like Colonel Sanders and you die 5 years later or something. I don't know what the actual number is, but time, I think that's why people are so um fascinated with 20-year-old millionaires, you know, because they look at it and they say, he got all that time now. He's out. He's out of the machine. He got all that time back. And that's what people are essentially chasing. Money is a store of other people's time. So you have a bunch of other people's time and you spend it so that you don't have to spend yours. But when you look at so many people don't know who will help them cross it. They haven't looked for the person to help them navigate to the next step in their business. And they haven't really thought about what they would pay to get what they perceive to be a return on investment. They say, I want to be at two, three, $400,000 income in like 5 years. Okay, who can help me get there? And what are they going to charge me to facilitate my goal, which is to get that? I said that goal, I'm here. I want to pass that bridge. What's the toll? And the go slow and steady people walk across the country, and the people who fly across the country are there in 3 or 4 hours, and then they get to enjoy all that other time that they bought by organizing the money that it took to hire all the staff to get them on that plane and land them and pay the pilot. And they bought all of their expertise, other people's time, the stewardess to bring the little crackers or cookies or whatever in the canned drink. And so how can we get that as soon as possible? And it's just the same as other people's money, in the sense that you have to accelerate the thing, there has to be money raised or money loaned. If you don't have the money, figure out programs you could buy online with credit cards and things like that, so that you can at least buy a little bit of it. Like the person who's just gung ho and goes fast. Well, they should at least, like a soldier, know the most probable path to success, no matter what minefield. They did the math. They did a pattern, and that would allow them to navigate a lot of the minefields based on kind of how people would place them. So that person can go a lot farther in that first exciting sequence. But if you get excited, try to do it yourself, kill yourself out there, you might never get around to the realization that, even some basic training, like the people who are in the call here, as well as the person to help you navigate that path as quickly as possible. So we're going to go to deal talk. That's another chapter from Money People Deal. And yeah, we'll see you on the next episode.